how can we not provide low barrier services? The alternative is to say, please find yourself a nice park bench.
We've tailored our programmings to be intensive in those first 21 to 30 days in order to prevent that longer stay. It's about getting people connected to the services that they need to end their experience of homelessness, ideally permanently. Our average length of stay is decreasing.
Like the DI, we're 24/7. There's no lineups at our place. I question whether we are still a shelter. Our first housing project opened in and around 2004. 20 years later, we're closing in on nearly 500 units. Your shelter work is a pretext to work on housing. You cannot be in homelessness if you're not working on housing.
You don't necessarily have to own and operate your own housing, but it certainly helps. We are doing 5 pilot sites in the province of Alberta. Shelters can be an engine to ending homelessness and not seen as that warehousing bottleneck. We need to start getting the private sector playing along as well, because it is a community issue and it takes a community response. If you say not in my backyard, you're saying yes to your front.
We need more housing-focused shelters if we're going to end homelessness. And that's what we're talking about. We have Sandra Clarkson, who is the CEO of the Calgary Drop-In Centre, and James Hughes, who is the CEO of the Old Brewery Mission in Montreal, Canada. Both shelters have been around for a very long time. In Calgary, they have reduced their long-term stays by 85%. And at the Old Brewery Mission, they're not even using the term shelter anymore. You've got to find out why. Thank you guys for joining us for this conversation. First, tell us about the Calgary Drop-In Centre.
The Calgary Drop-In Centre provides emergency shelter, housing-focused, low-barrier emergency shelter. We also offer numerous different health and recovery programs, as well as own and operate 3 mixed-market apartment buildings in the city of Calgary.
And how long have you been operating?
The DI has been in operation almost 65 years in the East Village of Calgary. It started out really as a soup kitchen type of model and then evolved to be an overnight MAP program. And then as, homelessness surged, the building that we're currently in today, which is a 100,000 square foot building, was developed and provides shelter for up to 1,000 people on any given night.
You're one of the largest in North America.
That is the unfortunate reality, yes.
Yes. And Montreal.
So the Old Brewery is celebrating its 135th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Celebrating is not necessarily the right word, right? Really acknowledging, that it's been around a long time. Homelessness has been around a long time. And kind of to your point, Old Brewery and the DI, the Drop-In in Calgary and others, we've been changing and shaping ourselves to the times we've been in.
Yeah.
And we as well started off as an old-fashioned, soup kitchen with a religious mission. We had a religious vocation at the time, save souls and save bodies and mind at the same time. That, needless to say, is not part of our suite of services anymore. Like the DI, we provide emergency services to over 400 people every day. And those are housing-focused, low-barrier services. We also offer a suite of rehousing options, almost 500 housing opportunities across the city of Montreal. And because the treatment of homelessness is not working, it's going up everywhere, we've decided to open a whole prevention program.
Right.
And for the last 3 years, we've been trying to identify upstream people who are at risk of homelessness and try to get them diverted into housing before they ever, touch the trauma of the work that we're in.
You said something very interesting, the treatment of homelessness. Care to explain that?
The homelessness sector is really all about waiting for people to become homeless and then trying to bring increasing amounts of expertise to bear to try to accompany them on a journey that is sometimes long and hard and difficult out of homelessness and into the most permanent forms of housing that we possibly can manage. So as a sector, Old Brewery included, have been waiting for people to come to our doors passively, in a way, referred by the police, referred by the hospitals, or people who just present themselves for a long time. I mean, we've been doing this almost since, a couple of decades after Confederation, right? So when you see numbers going up, almost 30% increase in homelessness since 2018 in the city of Montreal, that's representative really of what's happening across the country. We have to accept that while we're getting bigger and we're getting better, it's not working. Yeah. The treatment of homelessness is not working if you have the global mission of trying to do the exact opposite, which is try to see it plateau and then start to come down. Right. We're hoping that by introducing prevention services, working in prevention policy areas, developing housing programs that actually keep people in their housing. You never get rent-evicted if you're being supported by a nonprofit organization. Maybe that can help to try to bend the curve.
Do you have a product or a service and you're looking to market to nonprofit decision makers? Well, look no further. This spot could be yours. Email podcast@invisiblepeople.tv for sponsorship opportunities. I've always said it like this, is we've gotten better at closing the back door, but the front door is wide open. And that's why we're having such trouble right now working to solve homelessness, because we've got to work to prevent homelessness to begin with, right? You both said low barrier shelters. Yeah, I visited the DI many years ago. I think it was 2009, maybe. I'll have to look it up. Maybe 2010. And I don't think it was low barrier at the time. So is this something that's new?
The DI's always been 24/7. And
right.
I think perhaps there's different degrees of low barrier that may have existed at the time. Certainly to the extent that we are high access, low barrier now, I think that's certainly evolved based on the need of the people that we're trying to serve.
Well, in the States, at least, there's a big fight that, against low barrier shelters, and you were able to change with the times, so to speak. So can you explain or talk a little bit about how that happened and why it's important?
Well, I think certainly, like with the support of our provincial government, we are funded to be a low barrier shelter. So that is part of our mandate. And that's something that, as the board of directors is adamant that we do not move away from, no matter what sort of external environmental pressure we're dealing with. It is a core of the service that we operate, recognizing that we are in a lot of ways an agency of last resort for many who have, blown out of other programs and services, et cetera. And that's something we take an immense amount of pride in being, is at that low barrier 24/7 access.
Right. Did you help everybody?
That's right.
Now, for you, coming out of a faith-based history at one time, transitioning to low barrier could have been even harder.
Well said. We weren't always as low barrier as we are, to your point.
Yeah.
There was a lot of judgment going on, and that's exactly the challenge that we're seeing in places south of the border, but also in Canada. We're hearing about movements in Ontario about trying to fight the low barrier blessing, frankly, that we have, not to use too much of a religious word.
Right.
Ultimately, low barrier, how can we not provide low barrier services? The alternative is to say, please find yourself a nice park bench, right? I mean, at Old Brewery, right now the policy is very, very simple. You come in, whatever state you're in, and the only reason to restrict is because we sense that you may be dangerous to other staff or other folks in the building. So, that's a legal obligation for us. But otherwise, our mandate is to house everybody who's homeless. And there's no way we can do that as effectively outside as we can do inside.
Well, that's what low barrier means to me. I mean, people sure think of a lot of different things, but for me, it's just helping everybody. Right? Helping everybody where you are at.
That's exactly right. Like serving people where they're at any given moment. Let's just not leave them there, though, right? That's where the housing-focused, intentional work really comes into play.
You jumped right into it. That was my next question, because you're both operating housing. And I worked for a shelter. I was chief marketing officer for a large rescue mission. had services in 4 different cities, and we had 200 apartments and 150 shelter beds. So we were able to move people through, right? Or we would, help them get housing someplace else. But explain what a housing focused shelter is to you.
Well, I'll jump in first, James, and then you can share your vision of
Yeah.
it. I think from the get-go, the expectation is that your stay is going to be brief and as short as possible, and that shelter is a process, not a destination. So it's about getting people connected to the services that they need to end their experience of homelessness, ideally permanently, but also the doors are open if that doesn't work out for as many times as it doesn't work out. But hopefully it's a one and done type of scenario. And it's about being really creative and innovative and flipping over every rock to try to find the right fit housing for people so that they can not only obtain it, but sustain it and maintain it. Yeah. So it's not just about getting people housed, it's helping them remain housed. That starts with the intentional work of conversations where this isn't like a permanent stay. What do you need to get back out into community, and having conversations with people who may have been long-term shelter stayers, helping them re-envision the possibility of actually being in their own home.
People get used to it.
Yeah, 100%, and very quickly.
Fun fact, I lived in a homeless shelter for 7 years. And nobody should live in a homeless shelter for 7 years.
Absolutely not.
I mean, 7 months is too long.
Agreed.
And to your point there, and it was a faith-based shelter, and I would say, when can I get out of here, right? Because I was, coming out of homelessness. I'm now got some sobriety. I see people driving by in cars. When can I get a job? When I get my life back? And they would say, well, Jesus never stops discipling you, brother. There was no path unless I go into ministry. But I think it's just important that we focus on getting people from streets into shelter, into housing.
I can't agree more, and I it's interesting. Your story is super interesting. That's probably one that would have been relevant or real in a previous version of the Old Brewery, and is still real today.
Oh, very much so.
And that's not casting judgment. Like, that's just organizations and individuals find themselves in a certain space.
Yeah.
But if you ask yourself, if your vocation, if your purpose, if your mandate, your remit is to do your part to end homelessness, you have to be housing focused. And housing focus is really the opposite of what I think of as security focused. So organizations like ours, if you'll permit me, we come from a place of this classic image of the shelter, which is lineups to get in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, macaroni and cheese when you get in, line up again for a shower. Upstairs, security all over the place, making sure you don't beat each other up. Grab a breakfast in the morning, sleeping in big dormitories with 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 people. And as I say, after breakfast, you get out and you get on with your life, right? Go find a job, go find a home, go reconnect with your family. But if it doesn't work out, come on back. 4 o'clock. The image, the iconography almost of what a shelter is. And, we've said, okay, that is so not us anymore.
Oh, I like that.
And so we are, like the DI, we're 24/7. There's no lineups at our place. The food is restaurant quality. Because people deserve dignity. They deserve respect. There's no dormitories left in our network anymore. They're all single or double rooms. There's no security.
You have 400 people in the shelter part. You also said you had housing. I'm just talking about the shelter part. And you have single or double room.
I guess what I'm getting at is that I question whether we are still a shelter.
Right.
We actually don't use the word anymore. We call ourselves, we call that volet, as we say in French, or that part or component of our operations, emergency services. We don't say emergency shelter services because we don't want people to go there.
No,
because that's not us anymore.
I have their drawings of what you would consider homeless shelters in the 1890s in New York City. They didn't have cameras back then. It's an artist rendering. And often when I speak, I will put them on the screen, and then I put photos that I took of the Glendale Emergency Shelter that are cots in a 150 cots in a room. They're very similar, and I said, here it is over 100 years, and we're still warehousing people. So your image that people have of a shelter is spot on. That you're transitioning away from that, and I think calling it services is part of that transition, but you're actually, you see, I'm starting to glow here a little bit because I'm thinking of my own life where I stayed 7 years in a shelter, and it's like, oh my gosh, they got a room or a double room? That'd be awesome.
Well, because if I may, sorry, Sandra, if I
Please.
may, what do I need to do to be true to what my vision is that I give you the chance, I get you, not you, obviously, Mark, but the person that comes in through our doors, the chance to sleep well, the chance to eat well, the chance to feel respect and self-respect, the chance to feel security of not the kind of people, crossing their arms in the corners, but the kind that's real.
Yeah.
So now you are ready to engage in a meaningful conversation about the future in a way you might not have been otherwise been able to. So it serves the people. It says, I see you, I'm here for you, and I want to work with you at your side to help you think about the next steps in your journey.
How I'm receiving it, because when I went from the streets to a shelter, I still felt like I was homeless, and I didn't feel like I was on a path to getting out of homelessness, because it was 100% congregate shelter, right? I never had my own room. I never had a room with just somebody else. I did once have a room with 4 people. So that would have given me emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like, oh gosh, I am going to get out of this. Tell me about the drop-in.
Well, the unfortunate reality is the drop-in has not progressed to the same level that.
Well, you have
Old Brewery.
1,000 people.
Yeah, we do.
Right.
We do.
You have other challenges.
Indeed. So, I mean, we do have a mix of very congregate type floors, as well as others where there's more privacy, personal storage, assigned beds, etc., depending on which program you're participating, particularly in terms of being housing focused. So ideally, I would love to, first of all, get away from large congregate shelter type settings, have a smaller scattered sites, specialized programming, very intentional to help people get out of there as quickly as possible. We're not there yet, but it is something that we strive for.
You're striving for that. How long is the average stay?
It sounds like a really simple question to answer, but it's actually really complicated.
If you made it this far, that means you love this podcast and we love you. Please take a moment and write a review. Hit that 5-star thingy. And if you would like to suggest a topic or a guest, or just say hello, email us at podcast@invisiblepeople.tv.
It sounds like a really simple question to answer, but it's actually really complicated.
Right.
Because there's people that will come and say, 5 days, and then they're gone for 3 days, and then they're back for 4. And then, so how do you count that, right? And I think when we look at our long-term shelter stayers, we've been able to reduce that significantly from when we first made the shift and the transformation. We've reduced that by over 85%. But there's new people coming in all the time, but our average length of stay is decreasing. I could not tell you exactly what that is right now, but we've tailored our programmings to be really intensive in those first 21 to 30 days in order to prevent that longer stay, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And I got to tell you, I have a very fond memory of your shelter. But somebody from your staff had let us know that there was a homeless man that was dying of stage 4 cancer, and his only dream was to go to Mardi Gras. That's all he wanted to do, but it wasn't impossible. The money, logistics, his health, he's not going to New Orleans. So your staff brought Mardi Gras to him. And they, set up the room and they had a Mardi Gras party and it was just amazing. His name's Terry Pettigrew. And at the time, like for the first 10 years of Invisible People, there was no revenue. I mean, we were barely scraping by. I worked other jobs. I didn't really even know where my next meal was coming from, right? And here I'm talking to Terry Pettigrew, who's dying. He's been homeless for 50 years. He is living in a homeless shelter, right? He has cancer, and he's encouraging me. He's telling these stories I haven't watched the video in a long time, but I think he was talking about his grandfather and polar bears and just these real colorful stories you get from older generations, right? And he was encouraging me, and it was such a wonderful experience that I put up the video that night. So sometimes it takes me, I recorded a video last night. It might take me a month before I put it up, right? But that I went back to the hotel. I said, this is so wonderful. I got to share it. And the Calgary Herald put it on the homepage. I mean, they can't put it on their print edition, but they put it on the homepage of the digital edition. And his brother, Larry, who they have not seen each other in 36 years, saw the video, and then they were reunited.
God.
So
Amazing.
Terry actually passed away with family. And then when I did the Canadian road trip, is it Moose Jaw?
Could be. There is a Moose Jaw in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. So they lived in Moose Jaw, and I stopped in and I had dinner. They invited me to their house. Terry had now passed away, but I stayed in touch with brother and his wife for quite some time. So that's my memory of the Calgary Drop-In Centre.
Great story.
It's a wonderful story.
Beautiful.
Well,
Beautiful.
and it just makes me want to touch on one thing, and that is the staff, right?
Yeah, that's
The magic, that's where the magic happens every day, is on the front line and with the staff that are, dedicated, compassionate, devoted to getting people out of shelter and into housing and living their best life, whatever that might look like for them. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
It's a great story. I will talk about it from the stage when I speak, but you brought up something, staffing, because in the States, there's a staffing crisis. The low pay to other people paying more, or why am I going to work here where it's hard emotional labor and I can go over there and make money? So there's a staffing crisis. Are you experiencing that in Canada?
We are. It's in Quebec, usually around 10% of our jobs are vacant. That sounds like a lot. We're about 300, so about 30 jobs that are open at any one time. But the good news is it was much worse during COVID. So we had like 50, 60 job openings at that time. So that was wicked. And to your point, it put such pressure on the existing staff in an area where it's not always easy.
Well, and I think at the DI, as you mentioned, it's a really emotionally charged work environment, right? And I heard somewhere recently, heart work is hard work, and it is.
Ooh,
right?
I'm stealing that too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's not mine, but please feel free to use it. It's a great saying, and I think for us, we try to be really upfront about what the work is. So I want people to come in eyes wide open on all of our postings. To say, you will be exposed to A, B, C, D, E, right? There's no sugarcoating it. We're working with individuals who are experiencing literally their darkest days, who have lost connection with everything that's important to them. Right. And so the ability to see things through that trauma-informed lens is so, so critical. And lots of people think they can do it, but they can't, right? It is specialized skill set that's required, and it's not for everybody. And so we really try to do as much as we can up front to pre-screen, or at least help people understand the realities. Many people are drawn to the helping professions that aren't necessarily super healthy themselves. And so it's how can we work together to try to make sure that we're providing the best service for the people that deserve it, and deserve that and so much more.
Many years ago, I saw something. There was like a division between the Housing First people and shelters, right? There was almost a battle, a war. Some of it was the faith-based, because they were seeing their money cut, and it just became a conflict. In fact, I did a blog post and a video many years ago saying, it's not shelters or housing, it's shelters and housing. I mean, it has to work as a community-wide solution. And that's what's happening. And can you talk about how it's important to integrate within the community? Because you're not doing this alone.
No, I mean, this is I mean, the vocation of the network that Sandra and I co-chair, which is called the Canadian Shelter Transformation Network, and we're trying to support the shelter community across the country, and this is nascent, but start to really think in terms of making exactly that connection. That your shelter work is a pretext to work on housing. You cannot be in homelessness if you're not working on housing. They are coincident. Housing prevents homelessness. Housing solves homelessness. So if you're not in it, you're not part of the movement to try to end homelessness in this country. That's sometimes a long journey. Old Brewery, like we started into housing in 2004. So our first housing project opened in and around there during that first big wave of increase of homelessness. And 20 years later, as I say, we're closing in on nearly 500 units in multiple different ways. We're very agnostic on how we got our hands on housing. Others can do it. Think big, but start small, and get yourselves lined up with an organization. If you're not doing it today, an organization that can help you think about your options to get on that path.
Housing is absolutely the answer. You don't necessarily have to own and operate your own housing, but it certainly helps.
Right.
And I think we can't wait for any one agency, one system to solve it. We all have a part to play, and I think that also includes the private sector. So much is downloaded onto the nonprofit or civil society sector. We need to start getting the private sector playing along as well, because it is a community issue and it takes a community response, not just a nonprofit and government response, but we need the private sector, corporate sector in there too.
What was the organization you just name dropped?
To the Canadian Shelter Transformation Network, the CSTN, which is a creation of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. It's been around for about 5 years, but COVID kind of put us on the quiet, as it were. Right. But we have luckily got ourselves now, mostly through Sandra's amazing efforts, enough funding to hire a coordinator to help get us organized to start to communicate about the realities of shelters, what they're facing, to try to help them in a conversation about becoming housing focused and low barrier. It's important to think about those things almost in unison. And one of the big projects we're doing, which maybe I'll lateral the ball over to you on, is a really interesting initiative in Alberta to test guidelines for what it is to be a shelter with a housing focus and a low barrier orientation. Maybe you take it from there.
We've partnered with both the federal and provincial government as well as a private donor to be able to work alongside the University of Calgary, who's doing some independent research around housing-focused transformation. What does it take to get there? What is the impact of becoming housing focused? They started with a lit review, and of course there is no lit review because there's no literature on it. So it's all very much emerging practice. And so as a result of that, we are doing 5 pilot sites in the province of Alberta. We've got shelters participating from small jurisdictions. We've got family shelter, and trying to get a diversity of views on current operations and helping them make that transformation. So far, it's going really, really well, and that's in partnership with OrgCode as well.
Right. Ian.
With Ian DeYoung. And so we hope to build evidence that shows the efficacy of this model so that ultimately we can start to see, even in the province of Alberta, for instance, the core service agreements coming from the provincial government now have housing-focused language included in it. So it's an expectation that with the funding that you get to operate shelter, that there is a housing-focused component. And so just trying to make what may seem like little semantic changes, which actually have huge impact, start to make that happen across the country so that shelters can be an engine to ending homelessness and not seen as that warehousing bottleneck, build it and they will come type of idea.
We're humans and we're stuck in our ways. So I'm a shelter operator. I got my own way of doing things. We've been doing it, especially faith-based organizations, been doing it this way forever. How do we change that? How do we get those shelters in your network, or at least open paradigm to start changing?
I think one of them, Sandra mentioned, funders, I think are going to be both public and private are going to have expectations, I think, in the near term that, organizations are accredited to do the work that they are funded to do. And what better way than to say we are indeed a housing-focused low-barrier shelter, as, the CAH would understand that. The other incentive is that certainly in Montreal, and this is, I think, mostly the case elsewhere, we're facing the barriers of NIMBY in a way we've never seen. If you have an increasing homelessness population and you're needing to put a whole variety of services in neighborhoods that have never had them before, how do you make the case? Well, one of the ways to make the case is to say, we are an accredited organization. We are specialized to do this work. That's not us saying it. It is as an independent third-party body saying it. So, we're coming to town, but we're not just coming to town to make problems. We're actually coming to town to solve some of your problems.
Why do you think Not in My Backyard or public opposition is growing?
Because the population is growing so much. Homelessness is getting bigger in terms of the numbers. It's crossing parts of the city, Montreal, city, Calgary, that never existed before, in neighborhoods that never existed before. And with that increase in volume comes an increase of all different kinds of homelessness. So there's more women, there's more people who are using substances, there's more behavioral issues, more present. And so people are getting scared.
Right.
And that's totally legitimate, right? I understand that. And so we as a community, we can't necessarily assuage all those fears, but we got to take efforts to the extent possible to do our part to say, no, it's not what you think.
Right.
And by the way, that's another one of the reasons to say we're not coming with a shelter. We're coming with professional emergency services for people who no one else can serve.
Anything you guys would like to add?
Well, I think just on that sort of polarization that we're seeing in terms of the tolerance for unhoused people or issues of social disorder, and the NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Well, if you say not in my backyard, you're saying yes to your front.
That's a great note to end on.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.